All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here. My name is Giulio Berruti. I'm Climate Director in BSR's team. We're a global non-profit working with businesses towards a just and sustainable world. And it's a pleasure to be with you at Change Now today. I'll moderate this session around bridging business and impact, a very timely, in my view, and important topic. And I'm fortunate to share the stage with fantastic speakers, 5 of them. We'll have 2 of them today. I'll introduce them in a second, and then we'll follow the conversation with 2 other sessions. But to get us started, I wanted to ask you as the audience for a show of hands and your participation on 2 questions. The first question is really, can we bridge business and impact? If you believe that we can bridge business and impact, please raise your hand. That is great to see, and maybe part of the reason you're here at Change Now as well. But the second question is, are we bridging business and impact at scale right now, in your view? So if you agree with this statement, please raise your hand. All right, well, that's good to know, and it sets the stage for a conversation. I think what we're going to do today is to look at the challenges, the opportunities that relate to this topic. I want to set the stage for the conversation with a very short framing. In my work, we work on this topic a lot at BSR, and in a recent report that we wrote, Transforming Business Model, we show some stats around how half of the global GDP is linked to nature and sustainability, how we can expect a 50% GDP reduction in the second half of the century at the current rates of climate change, but also how big of an opportunity in terms of jobs creation and economic opportunity for business there is in bridging impact and business. So there is a significant opportunity for business, which we're going to explore today. But this requires nothing less than a transformation that includes looking at business models and how we operate as a business. So in the first part of the session today, we are going to talk with Allie Burns, who is the CEO of Top Tier Impact, and then Alessa Berg, who is the CEO of Top Tier Impact, very sorry about that, and Allie Burns, the CEO of Village Capital. And I want to actually give you both the floor. Maybe, Allie, we start with you for a quick intro of yourself, the organization, and also how your investment philosophy bridges business and impact.
Great. It's great to be here. First of all, I will say this is the first time I've done a silent conference, so it's a new experience for me, and thank you all for being here. So I'm Allie. I lead an organization called Village Capital. Our mission is to unlock social and financial capital for early-stage entrepreneurs building emergent solutions to environmental, social, and economic challenges. We are a 15-year-old organization. Over the last 15 years, we've directly supported more than 1,800 entrepreneurs around the world through our investment readiness programs. Those entrepreneurs have gone on to raise more than $7.5 billion in capital to support their businesses. We've also been able to spread our impact to thousands of other entrepreneurs through our tools, our online tools, as well as our partnership with a network of entrepreneur support organizations around the world. And we've made more than 150 investments in companies and early stage companies through our affiliated funds. And those companies I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but in terms of the question around how our investment philosophy bridges business and impact, it really is at the core of what we do. So as I mentioned, we support companies that are focused on impactful problems. So we start with the problem. So impact is embedded in the core of every business that we invest in. And the other piece of bridging business and impact that is critical to us is this philosophy of purpose-suited capital. How do we get entrepreneurs access to what they truly need to be able to scale their impact? Let's not just think about what the venture capital model looks like or whether they need a loan, but let's actually try to figure out what are they trying to achieve and what type of capital is most appropriate for them to be able to achieve said impact.
Thanks very much for that intro. And you talked about scale. We'll explore that in a second as well. But Alessa, over to you. maybe for the same question.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. First time in a silent conference as well. It's like a silent disco, but more serious somehow. So I'm going to start by sharing the mission of Top Tier Impact, because we begin and we end with that. Our mission is to take impact and sustainability into the mainstream of how investments are allocated and how companies are being managed. And this is a systemic mission. So, you know, for those of you here today, I wonder how many of you think that our economic and political systems need some change? Pretty much in agreement. And this kind of systemic change is not easy to deliver. This is really where the coordination and the translation work happens. So at Top Tier Impact, we have different parts of the business. What we're known for is our global network. We have members that on the investment side have in total trillions of dollars of assets under management, but we also have entrepreneurs across all areas of positive impact and across 50 countries at this point, all continents. We have professionals and corporates who are walking this walk, especially right now in a very tough environment from the corporate perspective, to be walking this walk today. And so within the network, it's really about creating synergies for our members, very concrete. Investments, partnerships, new companies, talent hires, making impact happen in a petri dish, I like to say, you know, making those synergies happen easier and faster. And then on the investment side, we take this systemic angle as well. And we say, what can we help catalyze and change that is also going to change ecosystems? So for instance, in Africa, we have been able to support with one that has still been the largest debt investment in a tech company, obviously impact tech company, in history. We've been active in Southeast Asia, in Latin America. So we take an angle of where can we unlock catalytic capital, where can we have investments happen that are needed the most and that can help build those markets. And then last and not least, we have a consulting side where we take this ecosystem innovation approach. So how do we build ecosystems for innovation that is going to, on one side, help the company understand the benefits of sustainability? So the bridge that we're speaking about today is impact and business, right? So bridging how sustainability and impact concretely affect the company and what is happening out there that they should be aware of. So it's, again, a systemic mission, but also a little bit of a system structure that we have, because we don't just have one way of approaching it. We have a network for all our members, we have the investment side, and a consulting and innovation practice.
Super. Well, thanks for situating that. And I think ecosystem and network and collaboration are keywords that will be a red thread of all of the discussion today. But starting with some of the challenges, we operate in an external environment that has been transforming. It's more difficult than it was just a few months ago. So maybe quickly, I can ask both of you to comment on what kind of impacts are you seeing that are maybe driving us further away from bridging business and impact, and then we can discuss about how to get there. Ali, do you want to start?
Sure. So I'll speak to the external environment from where I typically sit, which is in Washington, D.C., and we know that over the last 100 days, a shadow has certainly been cast from the White House because we've essentially closed the market to a lot of climate-related innovation in Washington. A number of the startups that we work with who are U.S.-based that have been counting on catalytic investments from the U.S. government have suddenly seen those promises taken away, and so they're scrambling. But entrepreneurs are pretty amazing and resilient, but they're scrambling to find what they need. And certainly for our emerging markets work, we're seeing challenges similarly in dollars that were expected to come in the door, both for entrepreneur support as well as catalytic investment disappearing because of the dismantling of USAID. And so it's certainly affecting us deeply. And as I said, entrepreneurs are really resilient. So this is the right time to be surrounded by folks who are just totally optimistic by nature. I know we're going to talk about this a little bit, while being very realistic about what the challenges that we face are.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to do something slightly unconventional and draw a line here in the middle. And I will put on one side business and politics, and I'll put on the other side insurers and investors. No offense if you're on the business and politics side for the moment, but I have to say, in my opinion, business and politics right now, obviously politics, but partially business for what concerns the corporate side, dropping all commitments. That's a tough spot to be at. That is happening, and I think it requires the understanding of the different stakeholders. For instance, within a company that drops all commitments all of a sudden, I don't need to tell you which ones, there's a long list at this point, right? Understanding that it's not just this one company that wants that to happen. There are different stakeholders within the company with different interests, right? And some of them are floored, really disappointed by what's happening. So that's on one side. Investors and insurers. I'll start with insurers, actually, because whether we like it or not on the political stage, there will be a big repricing of assets that will have to happen because of climate adaptation and because of the kind of world that we live in today. From a climate adaptation side, but also from a geopolitical side. So this will happen. And by the way, insurers, is there any insurer here in the room today? There you go. So one way or the other, they know it, right? And there is something right now happening in the insurance industry that I like to compare to animals in the savannah sensing the danger and withdrawing, you know? So what is happening is that, if you've ever been in the savannah, you know, you see, if there's a predator coming, suddenly things get very silent. Animals start disappearing. You know there's something going on. And that is what's happening right now. A lot of insurers are withdrawing from entire sectors and from offering insurance to those sectors. Sectors such as agricultural trade in commodities that are massively affected by climate change, such as cacao. Cocoa trade in the West African regions where it's produced the most, it's extremely affected by climate change. But we're talking about a drastic, complete change and potential obliteration of that farming industry. So there are all these things happening, and somehow you see the changes, and it's like, when is the penny going to drop? When is the microphone going to drop? That will happen sooner or later. So let's acknowledge that. How it's going to happen, big question. And it's for people like us here to try and understand different parts and be part of this. On the investor side, and that's partially the reason why I put investors on this side, there is quite a lot of understanding of this in some places, very little understanding of this in others. So, and I speak with very different types of investors all the time. I speak with institutional investors, speak with family offices, VCs. So in some places, there's this big question of, what are we going to do? But there is an understanding that it's not just because politics and the US goes like, oh, forget all climate science, we're done with it for 4 years. That's not going to change anything in the world, right? And so there is that understanding, but the question of like, how are we going to deal with this? This is massive. We've never dealt with something like this before. And by the way, you know, from our perspective, doing that job of helping bridging the gap for more investors to understand this and start taking steps to incorporate it is part of what we do.
All right, thanks. And I really love the metaphor, of course, of the savannah as well. It's very, very powerful. Maybe following on this, one of the things we talked about in preparing the panel is also that one of the things that need to change to bridge business and impact is the narrative. And so maybe, Allie, you can comment on that aspect. What, in your perspective, we can do better, needs to change if we are to scale?
So I learned a new, I'm going to age myself here, but I learned a new to me term recently, a slang term, delulu. I don't know if any of you have heard it before, but it's short for delusional. And I learned that it was actually, it originated in 2014 in the K-pop community, but has more recently been co-opted by Gen Z. And again, I'm like looking at the Gen Zers probably laughing at me, being like, oh my God, this Gen Xer. But has been recently co-opted by Gen Z to really talk about the importance of being slightly delulu and channeling optimism and some maybe unrealistic idealism. We've spent a lot of time, I think, in our space, in the impact investing space, doing the fear-mongering thing, and it really hasn't worked. It hasn't moved the needle in the way that does. So I really do think we need to weave in some Delulu and paint a picture of the future that we want to see. Paint a picture by sharing examples of what's working, sharing examples of the incredible vision of these early stage founders that we work with, to be able to create more optimistic narratives and more cohesive narratives as well. I think as a sector we have work to do to make sure that we are also aligned on messaging, because a lot of the folks who have been doing the successful fear-mongering on sort of the other side of the table have been incredibly united and cohesive. So how do we do that ourselves?
Great. And then, yeah, I think cohesiveness of messages is key. And we heard a lot in other sessions in the conference about the positive messages and the opportunity framing as well, which is absolutely great. I want to switch gears a little bit and coming to both of you. So you both work on moving truly transformative projects from pilot to scaling. So what scale is not easy, of course. How do you deal with that? Maybe Allie, I'll come to you first, and then Alessa, you can comment on your side as well.
Sure. So I think about scale in two different ways. I think the common narrative, speaking of narratives, I think the common narrative around scale is thinking about the type of company that is solving a particular pain point, disrupting a massive industry that has the potential to grow into a unicorn, a very high hyper-growth success story, and have impact at scale. And those are very important. We need companies to grow rapidly, to employ people, to create impact. And I think about the importance of horizontal scale. These are companies that are trying to solve a problem, maybe in a more niche market, maybe in whether that's geographic or sector, who may have an opportunity to grow at a more sustainable pace. They have the opportunity to raise the dollars just that they need to get to the point where they can have an impact in their particular niche. And we don't talk a lot about this horizontal scale, and we need a lot more companies that are able to do this sustainably. We spend too much time helping companies try to get to that hockey stick model in, I think, the early stage financing space, and that's just not appropriate for a lot of companies, but it puts a lot of promising ideas totally out of business. So I really think we need to think about scale in both this idea of vertical and horizontal. And in order to help both of these types of companies, we need strong ecosystems and communities around these companies. So certainly like what you're doing, Alessa. And we need to be able to surround these entrepreneurs with the technical expertise that they need, with the social capital that they need. A lot of the entrepreneurs that we support are often underrepresented. They do not have access to the same kind of social capital that maybe a well-educated entrepreneur living in Silicon Valley has. And so how do we surround folks with the resources that they need to be able to get to that scale is something that's really important to us.
Thanks. And Alessa, maybe continuing with you, when we spoke, it's really great to some of the types of financing that you channel and you bring to scale is around regenerative circular models and adaptation finance. Very important areas, but obviously difficult. Can you tell us a bit about how do we get to scale there, and maybe some of the key learnings along the way of your journey there?
When we're talking about scale, when we're talking about bringing more capital and even storytelling, I think what we're talking about is translation. We are translating different perspectives of seeing the same topic, the same object, but like relating to it differently. So from a storytelling side, I saw that firsthand because I was approached to create these impact entrepreneurship TV series. We have it on Amazon Prime. Unfortunately, it's just in the US right now. But it's positive, actionable stories that translate these paradigms that you're asking about. So when it comes to the regenerative investment paradigm, for instance, you're interfacing on one side with investors that are like, I'd love to make this impact happen, but what about my risk-return ratio? I don't understand the risk, and I don't know how I can get to a return that I can justify to my own stakeholders, right? And then on the other side, the regenerative projects that we work with, and we meet all the time, that are like, but what do you mean risk-return? Like, we've been doing this is proven, there's plenty going on, the returns are there. So it's this gap to bridge. And I think this continuous education and translation is a job for all of us. And within that job, I think there's trying to understand as well as possible the other perspective, right? So it's much less of these advocating, no, 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 you're not quite seeing this, right? But it's more like, tell me more about how you see it. Tell me more about your worries. Tell me more about where you're coming from. Maybe understanding the background and the backstory helps. Because at the end of the day, like, we're all going in the same direction. I think that every boardroom understands that if we continue like this in the long term, we're actually wiping out our own species. Like, let's just put it out there. It's not the Earth that has a problem. It's us. And it's not regenerating nature. We are nature regenerating itself. So these cannot even be argued with. And so from here, then, it's this translation of understanding the problems with allocating capital, the concrete ones, right? The ones that hopefully we can help bridge from one side to the other. And so, to answer your question on these specific sectors, whether it's adaptation, regenerative investing, this is what we keep on seeing and the gap to bridge.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think maybe to build on that, so in what you were saying, you were talking about how we need, all of us have a role to play. The impact investing community certainly does, but other actors as well. So from your perspective, what would you like to see from businesses or from other types of investors that could help scale? And maybe it's a question for both of you as well. We can start with you, Alessa.
What I would like to see is a movement away from reactive and leaning more into proactive. As I said, because we work with businesses as well, and now, these buzzword of resilience is landing in more places. And like I said earlier, this is actually about sustainability. But so from a resilience, security, and transition perspective, how do you move from being reactive and trying to say, well, what can we do on the risk perspective, to being proactive and equipping yourself with understanding all the innovators out there, understanding the ways in which you won't just try to avoid like the most oppressive and damaging parts of what's going to happen in your industry, but actually how you're going to move beyond that and build proactively within this new world. So a move from reactive to proactive is what I'd love to see. And let's acknowledge that it's not easy, because it's also a move from fear to courage.
I'll be very quick. The only thing I would add, which is what we'd like to see from large corporates, more established companies who may not have impact at the core of their business, tap into the potential of startups. They are innovative and they can help you transform your business to be able to respond to some of these changing market conditions.
Great, and I think that's a great connection, with the conversation we'll have later on. But I want to ask you about examples, because then it's always helpful to ground us in examples a little bit. Maybe starting with you, Allie. I think we can learn a lot from these entrepreneurs and the companies you work with. What are some transformative models or ideas that you can bring and share with us?
Yeah, gosh, I could talk all day, but I'll try to be brief, since I know we've got just a couple minutes. We've talked about, this takes time, and so the first example I'll give is with a company that first participated in our program and received investment from us almost a decade ago, called Kuli Foods. They're a U.S.-based company who saw an opportunity to bring moringa, which is a climate-resilient crop, into the wellness industry in the United States. Over the last 10 years, they've been able to raise about $13 million, which is a large amount of money, but not a substantial amount of money if you look at sort of traditional venture rounds, to be able to capture 50% of the market in the United States. And they make snacks and bars, they make powders for smoothies, et cetera. And they're in all of the major retail chains in the United States, and they've gained a ton of traction. But it's taken them time, and so it's important to have patience. Other quick example, I want to give a shout out to HelioRec, which is a company that's out here on the expo floor. They're doing floating solar installations. They've participated in one of our programs, so go see them and say hello. And I will stop there, but I've got like 12 others if people want to find me later.
Well, I think that I could start by pointing at pretty much all of you in the room, and I hope to learn from as many as possible the innovations that you're working on and that are much needed. And therefore, because there's so many that I could point at, I will mention the one that I was seeing just as we were walking upstairs presenting before, Common Ground. This is land restoration, and regeneration of land requires such an ecosystem approach. It requires so much coordination, because soil health is like human health. It's not just like, you know, Western medicine, like let's touch this thing and like fix our health in one way. That's good when extreme intervention is needed, but holistic health is about how we are doing as beings in our day-to-day, and soil is the same. And so I think that the skills for, I mean, they've regenerated, they were just mentioning the figures before, massive amounts of land. And I think we can learn from that kind of ecosystem regeneration. Also for the stakeholder translation I mentioned before, what does it take to coordinate the kind of systemic change we want to see happen? So that's an example there.
Great. I see we're out of time. I just want you to leave this panel maybe with the last word of inspirational or any other thoughts you have for the audience as they go back to their daily job and want to bridge business and impact.
We got this. Stay optimistic. It's been so refreshing to be in this space the last couple of days. We were just talking about this, so thank you all for being here.
If tomorrow is your last day and today you're doing what you would be doing anyway, you're fine. You're on it.
Right. Well, great. Thanks, everybody, and big round of applause to our two speakers. All right, I'm going to move us along to the second part of the session. So I have the pleasure of welcoming our next panel. So Ezgi Berg from L'Oreal. She is the Chief Corporate Responsibility Officer there. And Iris van der Veken, Executive Director of the Watch and Jewellery Initiative. Warm welcome. I think I would start as well with giving you the opportunity for a quick intro and maybe speak to your respective organization. L'Oreal possibly doesn't need presentation, but let's start with that, a quick intro, and then we can get into the rest.
I'm going to give you the floor. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. What an inspiring, incredible setting for us to come together to look for those reasons to believe. So really happy to be here. I am Ezgi Barsinas. I am originally from Cyprus. The reason why I highlight that is, you know, from a very young age, I got to see what it meant to grow up in a small community, you know, on an island surrounded by water that is highly water stressed. I come from a family, both sets of my grandparents were actually from farming communities. So again, from a young age, really understood the importance of natural resources, their finite nature, but also the importance of soil health. I was really inspired by the speech earlier as well about soil health and what that means. Trust me, there are many, many farmers out there that know and understand. They may not speak exactly the technical languages that we do in sustainability, but they are investing in their land and in their métier. So originally from Cyprus, I am currently the Chief Corporate Responsibility Officer at the L'Oreal Group, member of the executive committee, really humbled and fortunate to be leading the sustainability strategy and execution for the group, and also the CEO of the Fondation L'Oreal. Really happy to be here to talk to you more about how we are tackling some of these challenges.
Fantastic, and we'll do that in just a second. Iris, first, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Iris van der Veken. I'm actually from Belgium, living in Geneva, and I'm the Executive Director of the Watch and Jewellery Initiative 2030. We're actually a young organization that was established by two competitors, Maison Cartier, delegated by the Richemont Group, and the Kering Group. Today, we have over 70 leading brands, organizations that are really on this journey to accelerate three important interconnected topics on sustainability: climate resilience, resilience, biodiversity, and nature and inclusiveness. And like we said it so nicely earlier, we're on this journey. We really want to push the industry to more transparency, accountability, and positive impact.
Okay, and I'm going to start with you actually, Iris, since you started discussing about the organization. I feel that the Watch and Jewellery Initiative is a powerful and interesting example of multi-stakeholder collaboration. Maybe you can elaborate a bit more for the audience why you think that a model like this can bridge business and impact.
Well, this morning we heard it, I think, very well by Paul Polman, how important it is when you set up an organization that you have a very solid governance. And I think from the start, when the initiative was established, we really invested in quite a different kind of governance that is very multi-stakeholder. So when you look at our governance, on one hand, you will have the CEO of Chanel Watches and Jewelry, and you have someone like Mr. Vigneron, the former CEO of Cartier, and Marie-Claire Daveux from Kering, but also independent experts like from Social Accountability International, Global Compact, etc. And at the same time, we have advisory committees, very multi-stakeholder. So we go back to Human Rights Watch, to WWF, to different organizations. On everything that we build till date, it goes through multi-stakeholder consultation. We also have a very solid independent risk and compliance committee, because you can imagine, and you will know it as L'Oréal, when one brand gets into trouble, it will hit the total reputation of the integrity of the collective. And I think also generally, when we were talking about it, you need to have leadership at the top. So I think the co-chairs of the board are really pushing the agenda that this is not a platform to talk about blah, blah. This is really about actioning, and that actioning is tough, but we are here to push the needle through advancing the industry.
Fantastic. And you talk about leadership, about governance, but purpose and values are also one key aspect if we really want to bridge business and impact. And L'Oréal, being in sustainability and seen as a leader for such a long time, certainly has things to tell us about that.
Yeah, so L'Oréal Group is the leading beauty company in the world. We are organized across 4 divisions: consumer products, professional, dermatological, and luxury. And maybe the best place to start answering that question would be our corporate purpose. Our corporate purpose is to create beauty that moves the world. And by beauty, we mean ways to champion sustainability, inclusivity, dignity, empowerment. So when you start with that, it really flows throughout our business, in everything we do, every decision we make, in how we bring that sustainability and inclusivity lens. So what does that look like? It starts with product design, how we think about our raw materials and packaging choices. It goes into our operations inside our 4 walls, how we think about efficiencies, resource use, innovation, to how we deliver those products. How do they show up on shelf? How do we work with consumers and raise awareness? But also thinking through some of the post-consumption challenges at the end of life. So it really runs across the whole value chain in how we think about sustainability, driven by our strong convictions and values. And to bring that to life, you need an incredible team, not just a core corporate sustainability team that sits at the center, away from the business or supply chain, but actually truly inside the business across functions. And I'm proud to say that I have what I would call a team of teams within the company, sitting in research, in operations, in finance, in human resources, but also in our business divisions, as I mentioned before, our zones, our countries. So it's these teams that work every day in their everyday functions and roles, in sourcing, in how they think about these sustainability challenges and opportunities to continue to find ways to unlock shared value, but also build resilience.
Okay, that's a very powerful example, and we could talk about that all day. but I think I want to stay on the theme of resilience. So I'll go with you, Ezgi, as well. I think we cannot speak about bridging business and impact in companies without talking about value chains. That's where the most negative impacts are, and the most positive impacts can be as well. And so my question for you is really, in your approach, you look at climate, nature, and business resilience together, and think about your value chain. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about concretely what kind of steps you're taking there.
So climate and nature are incredibly interlinked. And often what you find is in different rooms, in different settings, one gets talked about and the other one is left behind. So to give you an example, we are looking to reduce our emissions. What does that mean? We are looking to, one example, switch to more bio-based ingredients. As we're switching to more bio-based ingredients, it means that we're increasing our impact and dependency on nature around the world. If we're sourcing over 1,600 raw materials from over 300 plant species around the world, that means that we are touching and we're parts of many, many local ecosystems, sourcing communities, agricultural communities around the world, and we really have to be thinking about what does climate change look like, what is that climate impact in the field, around the field, where do we need to invest, not just on the field, but also upstream, really thinking through how are you building resilience, what does that land need, is it irrigated, is it rain-fed, again, the importance of soil health comes into play there as well, but really thinking through these elements and having that nuanced understanding of climate and nature and how, as you're looking to reduce emissions on one side, you're maybe increasing your impact on nature. But on the flip side, you could also turn to nature and identify those nature-based solutions to build climate adaptation and resilience. And again, this was a big topic that we discussed with Anna Toni, COP30 CEO, earlier this morning at a small breakfast meeting, where often we don't talk about climate adaptation and what that looks like and how we need to, again, as businesses, continue to activate and find ways to invest in these solutions as well. So really incredibly interlinked. But the last example I would give you is, well, what does climate change and the loss of biodiversity and the growing water stress look like for our consumers? This is also a big consideration for a company like L'Oréal. So how will our consumers, in an increasingly more water-stressed world, continue to carry out their daily hygiene and beauty routines? What does that look like? How do we have to rethink our product innovation? More no-rinse solutions, fast rinse solutions, you know, in different markets to meet the needs of those local consumers and the communities. So again, climate and nature are so incredibly linked, and I think we have to find ways to continue to multi-solve. That's what I like to call it. So not just solve for climate and nature and livelihood separately, but really think through in a multidimensional way of how do these things come together in real life settings for us to find those real life solutions that can be scalable. And I'm sure we'll get to the scale topic later on.
Yeah, and super interesting. So thanks a lot. And one thing that comes to mind is also you talked about the customers, and of course they need to be part of the equation for sure. My mind goes also to the responsibility of companies and how influential companies like yours can be as well. So that's something I wanted to bring to the floor. But Iris, you work with the range of companies that also have global value chains. No wonder about that, or for now at least. So the choices that they take at design stage are very important, and they matter for climate, for circularity, for nature. Can you tell us a little bit more about the learnings from your work in there as well?
Yeah. So what we've seen, of course, within the initiative, that companies are at very different stages of maturity, depending, where they are. And I think the lessons we've learned is that some of those big brands are very advanced, and they can really bring and accelerate the others. And I'm going to give you a few concrete examples. We've really built a nature roadmap for the industry. We actually took a 12-month pathway, working with many different stakeholders to build that nature roadmap, because we saw that many companies, like you said so well, Ezgi, they look at climate, but they disconnect it from nature, and they do not think about the just transition pathway. So actually, over the past 2 years, we have developed what we call an action pathway. And this is really a pathway for companies to start understanding their dependencies on nature. So, your baseline assessment, how dependent are you from nature? What is your impact, where you source from, depending, is it rough diamonds, is it from Botswana? Is it from Canada? You're manufacturing in India, you're sourcing gold and different materials. And of course, everything has a positive, has often a negative impact that you have to translate to a positive impact. So what we've really been doing is working with scientists and technical experts on building a model that companies can implement depending on their size. We've worked with a technology provider in London, ESG Book, so they work with 10 of the top banks in the world on building actually a digital platform, but not just bringing companies on this probably anxiety journey, but really on a journey of education. So lots of education, help desk risk support with technical experts, and then the opportunity to really, put in the data so we can start benchmarking. And going back to your question on circularity, really, we're sitting here next to the 7-star hotel of L'Oréal. You're so advanced. But what we see, and I think that's the beauty, is that many young designers are really rethinking how they're going to design. And that needs a systematic change also from the education level. So I think we need to invest also working together with the brands and the suppliers from the moment working with university and schools to really change that mindset from the moment they start designing their jewelry and their watches. And we have some fantastic examples with Breitling, for example, but also ID Watch Geneva, a very young new brand. And it's good, when new brands come in, it makes the industry move.
That's fantastic, and what I really like about that are really two things. One is that both of you spoke about this connection about climate, nature, and thanks for bringing up just transition and the social side. We really resonates with the work that we do as well. And the second one is how you brought up the startups, which really, I think, matches what Alessa and Allie were talking about before. That's a clear link, and I know that you guys are doing some fantastic work in creating an ecosystem there as well. I don't know if you want to say a few words about that. Otherwise, what I would like to hear from you is about the importance of scale as well. So we know that there are constraints, there are challenges. They could be economical, they could be resource, they could be technological related. But we also know that large companies like L'Oréal can use scale as a force of good. So can you tell us a little bit about that and your journey, and maybe some advice to the audience as well?
We are incredibly conscious of the responsibility we carry as the leading beauty company in the reach and the scale that we have around the world. And for a company like L'Oréal, born out of science over 115 years ago, we have that pursuit of excellence, innovation, and science in everything we do. We even say, science is not linear, it's exponential. So we have this firm belief that there are solutions out there, and if we put them to good use and we bring the right parties around the table for them to see how it comes to life, we can actually find scalable solutions. And the challenge we face today is not a lack of solutions. I mean, if you look at here, this incredible setting that we're in, we have, I believe, 300 startups with booths, probably hundreds more that are coming and visiting and being represented and talking and engaging with each other. So the solutions are out there. The challenge, yes, is for us to scout those solutions, identify them, but there is an even bigger challenge. Once you identify a solution, how do you bring it to scale? What does the first few years of the life of that solution look like? How does it integrate? How does a startup or a new innovative breakthrough solution integrate into a big business? How do we think about our sourcing practices, our onboarding practices of these new suppliers, the vendor agreements, the enabling environment that we can create for these solutions to come and be part of our value chain and have the freedom and the flexibility to really scale at the pace that they deserve. So one example I can give, you can also check it out. The L'Oréal booth is going to be on your right when you go down the stairs, and we also have a few startups that we're working with that are also nearby with their own exhibits. One of the startups that's down there is Abolis. It's a small biotechnology platform that is helping us identify bio-based ingredients. Again, coming back to the topic of more natural bio-based ingredients. We found this incredible partner in Abolis, but we also realized that we don't have the industrial capacity and capabilities ourselves in-house for us to be able to bring their solutions to scale. So we actually announced late last year that we got into a 3-party agreement with Evonik, one of our existing industrial suppliers. So coming together, so a startup, an industrial supplier that's bringing those industrial capabilities, and us, really not only to look for the solutions and pilot them, but actually find ways to scale them. And I think this is a big topic that doesn't often get discussed. And I can see my team members from sourcing, from research that are also sitting around the table. None of this would have been possible without their dedicated efforts to ask the right questions around how do we bring this to life? It's not just about chasing a number, a metric, or saying, hey, we found a solution, but actually being able to bring that solution to scale. So this is, I think, one example. Another one I can give, and again, I give huge credit to my sourcing and operations team, is late last year, again, we announced a new debt fund, a Solstice fund that we created to help support the decarbonization of our small, medium-sized suppliers. So as we're looking to decarbonize inside our own operations, taking the learnings and the best practices with the energy efficiency improvements, with the renewables that we're bringing into our own operations, we are now increasingly turning our attention more and more to scope 3, so upstream and downstream, the emissions that exist outside our four walls, and really, again, asking ourselves the questions of, okay, maybe some of our bigger suppliers are well on their way in their journey towards a net zero target. Maybe they have set some science-based commitments. They are decarbonizing their own operations, but there is still a big economic hurdle to some of the smaller, medium-sized suppliers and companies that are out there that really want to go and pursue these new solutions, but that they don't have the initial capital investment that is needed. So, you know, the catalytic investments that were discussed earlier today, I think this is the other piece that we have to really be thinking of, again, as we're looking for those challenges, you know, be it economic, be it technological, be it from a scale perspective, how do all these things come together so that we can continue to really bring that big transformation to life?
Thanks a lot for bringing it to life for us a little bit. The point about small and medium suppliers, I'm really happy to hear about that, because we know that it is a challenge for small suppliers that often lack the financial resources or the skills in some cases. And most of the Scope 3 work has been focusing on larger suppliers. So I'm very happy to hear that. And I want to stress one point that you just made before that, which is by calling out their different functions within the company. That's a really important sign. If we want to bridge business and impact, we need the impact and sustainability work to get outside of the sustainability work and really be embedded in there. So thanks about that. I think we have a few more minutes before the last part. But Iris, I want to ask you about, we discussed with the previous panel about the current external environment. So we know that the business case for aligning sustainability and core business strategy is not easy, or maybe it's harder than it was before. What can you tell us? How, in your words or in the way that you see it, why is it more important than ever right now? And I want to bring into the equation, we talked a lot about climate and nature as well, but we know that impacts on people and gender equality, which is a cause that you champion as well, is important.
Well, first of all, if I look at our industry, watches and jewelry, these are very emotional purchases. When you think about when you buy a piece of jewelry, it could be for, you know, self-empowerment, could be for a loved one. It's special moments in life. So it's very important that when brands are built, it takes decades to build a brand, that behind that story is a narrative that's credible and that's based not on assumptions, but proof points. And I think what I see is that our industry will continue to advance. Yes, there is definitely tension because of the fact of, you know, I think the legal uncertainty in certain, you know, and compliance adaptation. But I see, you know, the continued push to move the needle. And I wanted to touch upon one point. I think what I also see is a huge acceleration towards the suppliers. As you can imagine, many of our brands are using the same suppliers, and those suppliers are squeezed sometimes in the middle. They don't have the sophisticated lawyers, they don't have the experts, they don't have the technical experts, and that's where we as an initiative are also really have put a lot of investments on, for example, you know, science-based targets, helping them build climate resilient policies, but also, you know, looking at their nature roadmap, etc. And I just wanted to tell to the audience also, please go to our website, but at the same time, all the materials that we are building, we want to open source it to other industries, and also the technology solution that we've just built and have tested. We launched it in Davos in January, that we're willing to give that to other industries also to build upon, because we were just talking that we will definitely have a coffee after this session, but we also need, with a lot of humility, we need to learn from others. If I think on the element of water, for example, I've learned a lot from different industries, what are the tools out there, the methodologies out there to accelerate accelerate. And then a final point on gender. It's great to see so much diversity in the room, but we know that we're 300 years behind. You know, through the geopolitical tension, it's going to be worse. If we want to really push and advance women empowerment, we need to see that women entrepreneurship and economic empowerment is advanced. And that's why I would ask all of you in this room to sign the Women Empowerment Principles, but also work on our gender-responsive procurement. We've been doing a very interesting pilot on that with 7 brands. Happy to share the results. You know, how much do you know that you are buying from women entrepreneurs in your value chain, and how can you build strong coalitions? So there's no reason to leave someone behind, and I think today at Change Now and the past days shows this is a community of hope and action.
Thanks very much for that. And in reality, this is a perfect transition to the next session as well. But before I do that, I'll take the opportunity. We discussed in preparing this panel how, and I made clear in my intro how I feel that business model transformation is a critical lever to explore. And I think if you want, it could be helpful if you, I know that you've been thinking about new models within L'Oréal. If there's anything that you can share in terms of inspiration with the audience, that would be great.
Yeah, maybe as a final example, again, you can check it out at our booth on the right, down the stairs, in front of the coffee shop. Maybe one quick highlight and a quick shout out to our incredible teams, again, in innovation, in our divisions and DMIs, our marketing teams. Our refill packaging, refillable packaging, and you'll see our refill fountain. This is this fountain that actually demonstrates or showcases different brands in how we're creating circularity. So we talked about sustainable solutions in the nature of their longevity. So when you think of sustainable products and you're putting them in market, on shelf, we really have to also be thinking of how do we make them desirable. So our luxury division for the longest time actually has been really thinking through some of those design codes that come to life and how we can cherish the packaging of a product as much as we cherish the formula or the perfume that's in it. So we created these circular refillable products, and you know, it's a brand new market, and we've been spearheading it for the last few years. The fountain you'll see downstairs was piloted a couple years ago. Now we're looking to roll it out across different retailers, and looking to learn, again, really thinking through you know, those consumer messages that will resonate around refill more and save more, and how it can have a more positive environmental impact, but also an economic benefit to the consumer as well. So just a quick shout out and an example on circular models, yeah.
I'm going to invite you to work on our circularity white paper now with Deloitte that we're going to launch with some really great watch brands, because actually that's what we also would like for the industry to showcase. It is possible. We have an expert here in the room, Fabienne De Lupo, on really what does circularity mean, and we also want to get change that mindset at the top and through the business functions. So we have a lot to learn from L'Oréal.
Great examples will go a long way. With that, let's conclude this panel, but please join me in a big round of applause to Iris and Esther. Right, and then for the last part of this session, I have the pleasure of welcoming Giovanna Quadros, so please join me on stage. All right, Giovanna, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure is mine, Julius.
I did hint to this session before when I said it's a perfect transition, but I think let's start with tell us about you and your project, and I think all will become clear.
So I am Giovanna Quadros. I'm from Belém do Pará in Amazonia, and now that is about Amazonian COP30. So I have the first movement in Brazil of sea level that we arrange all Latin America. So in my movement, we have 10 years this year. We have the presence of big corporations in Latin America, such as Bank of America, Bank of Brazil, Sephora, Adidas, Microsoft, and many others. We are the partner of UN Women in Brazil. We also do many events internationally, as with Oprah Winfrey in Brazil. We are the partner for the events that occur there. We have one big event in the year that we recognize big names in different leaderships in finance, technology, and many others in Brazil. And we have the first forum of C-levels as well, where we get together as much as the mentors for centuries. So we are doing this for 10 years, and now we are getting to the next step with the projects we have. And beside this, I am in charge as a vice president of the Council of Women in Brazil for Industries and Federation of Industries in São Paulo. That is the biggest PIB in Brazil. I am in charge for the gender at ESG in Startup 20 for the G20. And now I am in charge of the Copy Plus journey with the Federation of the Industries in Amazonia. I'm from there. And we have the biggest movement concerned gendered for COP30.
Right, well, fantastic, and a lot of hats as well, a lot of work.
Yeah.
I would like you to tell us a bit more about Mujeres Inspiradoras, so the movement that you created. I really like how it can be an ecosystem for change, and maybe you can share with us a bit more, how did you come up with the idea? How is this helping to bridge business and impact with this particular model?
I think I'm going to be very clear. I see a lot of women here today, some friends as well. So, how many of us are alone in the table? How many of us are alone in the table? Have a 3 or 2 in the decisions. We are leaders and doing our work, and then we are only by ourselves as a leader. A lot of us, right? So as much as I got higher and higher in my career, less women I could see in the table, in the decision, in different segments. I passed for different segments. And if you see in the percentage, we are very few. So we are alone in different segments doing our jobs and growing our careers. We are talking about over 50% of women in population. We are the mothers of the other 50%, right? And it's still, we don't have a representative in economy or social or political part. So the movement was according to, we have this group together for the first time. So we make a collective where we can do decisions together and make a movement together and bring more women in leadership positions. So this is the idea. Most of the movements you see in the base, so for the first time, I get them together to the top so we can make a decision to help all the pyramids.
Thanks much for situating us with the movement. And I think to make it really concrete for the audience and maybe inspirational as well, I'm sure that through your work you get to a lot of stories that are inspiring, but female leaders are empowered and get to make change, to promote change in their organization. Is there maybe some stories that you want to share with us on how you created impact there?
Yeah. We have many different. When we are together, we can improve our sectors. So we have one of the movements that are working inside our collective that get into the menopause, 40 plus women. So this is getting to law in Brazil now because of our movement. Another one getting the collective for violence against women. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs, social leaders together in order to make a movement against the violence of women in Brazil. we have another 22 years old from Pará state in Amazonia that is doing a kind of brick with the shelf of the acai berry, you know. And she lives in a region that even do not have any kind of way of life. It's all garbage. So she gathered this garbage of the acai, turned into a brick, and changed the houses of her community. And in a very, very poor isle inside Amazonia. And this make a change for the whole society of this young lady. I put her in the event. Now she's turning to Forbes under 30 because one of the journalists of my event saw it, and she got investment. And with this investment, she's building a science school in a little town there down in Amazonia, because she was in the stage together with all high leadership as well. So when we are together, we can change this movement to young ladies, to other societies that not being seen, not being heard until now. So it's many examples, but some of them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many more that you can share as well. But I want to talk about the challenges as well, because it can't be easy to create a movement like this. And I think one thing that comes to my mind is it must be difficult to move from the initial impetus and it being a one-off to a continuous movement that evolves over time and achieves impact over time. So can you share a bit with us about what challenges have you encountered, and what can you tell maybe to others that are on the path to creating ecosystems of change?
The first one, Julius, the first one is make we all together in the same community. We are doing alone in our different sectors, so which one you are doing alone. And the first thing is make them together and to see these issues about women together. So the first stage was get for the first time the leadership together. And now we turn into a movement to an ecosystem. So we to move from movement to ecosystem, a real community, we need to start to think as a collective, not individually. And as a collective, we start also to change habits, to make decisions together, and for sure to make a change in the community together. If you are doing by myself in finances and sustainability and I don't know, many different, but if you're doing this together and we have a power to change the numbers, because we are so small in Brazil, we would even get into 60% of women in leadership. And if I am half of the population and I don't have a representative in these different categories of power, and even in Amazonia is even worse. So it's not a discussion anymore to talk about sustainability, new economy, and don't put the women in focus. And we are going to do this in COP30. We are not looking for the Amazonian women. So we get into there and it go by and that's it. So we have to get the opportunity to see the Amazonian women and to make a change in the Amazonian women lives. So this is the time, and we can make this together, I believe so.
Fantastic. And I think the two key words that really stick with me is to simplify collaboration, really, but getting all the stakeholders together, but also I think the importance of getting this affected or the relevant people in the room, such as the Amazonian women that you're mentioning, I think is key to any meaningful and lasting impact. So thanks a lot for raising that. You started mentioning COP30, and I want to continue on that thread because it's I think everybody in this room is looking forward to that towards the end of the year. It's seen as a big opportunity for governments and businesses to connect the climate, the nature, the people agenda It's going to be in your hometown. Um, how are you preparing for it, and what recommendations do you have for people who are about then to start the journey towards COP30 later this year?
I think we have a very big opportunity right now. The whole world is looking to Amazonia, right? And we have to take this opportunity to have our own narrative, not told by the others, because it's very easy to be by the others' narrative. So we have this opportunity. With these opportunities on focus, how we can change into the economy. We have a lot of indigenous people, indigenous women in difficulty right now there. We have a lot of our ecosystem and sustainability right now suffering. And these are the people that need the most. So how governments and business and a collective together can make a change there. As a leader of gender and ESG inside the Startup 30 into the G30 in the last year, we delivered a report for the government, and we passed by to South Africa this year. And now in my report, statement was I will make a program to develop the women locally, okay, with educational program from the government of Brazil already. And I have the Spiral Women of the Year. There is a very big movement with television cover in my country. Instead of me doing in São Paulo, I live in São Paulo now, but instead of me doing in São Paulo, I'm gonna do in Belém. And the idea is we as mentors of these women in Belém, develop them, bring them an opportunity to have investment, bring them opportunity to make a very good, more inclusive program, working in STEAM, science, technology, where everybody says that not occurring in Amazonia, not occurring with women in Amazonia. So we have a program, we have a hub that is a house with many lectures. We have many institutional, international, very important together with us in this movement. So my suggestion was, if you want to know a little bit more, be together and make the change for our region and for the center of this conversation, I think the moment is now, and I invite you to enjoy us this year in November.
Thank you. And yeah, looking forward to that moment. I'm sure it's going to be an important one. We really hope so. To close the session, because we have limited time left, I want to get us back to where we started. So we started with Allie and with Alessa, talking about how the times are turbulent in a certain way. The times are turbulent and for sustainable business and impact investment. And I'm sure that you're facing some of that as well. So I would like you to share, if you have any thoughts or recommendation for the audience as they go back to their daily jobs. What's your thoughts about how can we scale impact now in this current environment?
I think when we are in a room like this, we can scale impact. Maybe it's just to you to see each other and in the next chair and see what the business they are doing and how can we do this together. In this morning, I was with Rome ambassador from the human rights of France in a meeting. And from this meeting, we bring together a project for leadership in public sector and private sector, and we do a very big thing in Brazil, for sure in the second semester, with this conversation of today. So I have to come over to France to have more impact for sure. Be here with you today is giving more impact for sure, because you live here for at least idea, how can I do impact from the seat where I am right now, the business that I'm doing right now, how I can make this movement. But without doing by yourself, why not to look for the person on your side, to look as a movement, how strong we can be if we are doing this decision together. Again, a movement become an ecosystem and a real community if you start to think collective, if you start to make the decisions together and change the society together. Thank you.
Right, great way to conclude. Please join me in a round of applause for Giovanna.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining.